Our individual faith and response to faith really matters because we have to have ownership over our own faith. It can't be your parents' faith, or maybe you've even heard the phrase before, like God has no spiritual grandchildren or something like that. It's like, it's not just an inherited thing. At some point you have to have ownership because ownership matters.
Hi, welcome back to another week of Behind and Beyond. I'm Allison, and this week I get to sit down with Pastor John as we explore the sermon from this past weekend. Hey, John.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be back.
It's been a little while, it feels like. Yeah.
I don't have any candy.
I know.
To try.
I know. I thought about bringing you some this time, and I failed on that. Next time, we'll be ready.
We'll see.
Yeah.
It was a fun experiment. Yeah.
I don't know that anyone else wants to listen to us eat snacks on a podcast,
Yes.
but it was fun for us anyway.
That's true. I didn't think through the chewing part of all that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Also, those would take a very long time.
Yeah.
They do have new ones now. I was thinking nerd clusters. Have you seen the new nerds clusters that now have like juice injected in them?
Yeah, we don't have to talk about this.
That's too far even for me. But hey, let's jump into talking about the church instead today. So, Hey, I started last week with Amanda with a couple of questions just about life in the church. And I thought I would do the same with you. So the first one is, you didn't grow up in the church, but you've been a part of the church now for many years. And so I'm curious, what is a funny or awkward or even embarrassing story that you have to share about life in the church?
Yeah, I was struggling with thinking through this because I figured the question might be coming, and you reminded me of one that happened to me. I'm not really good at remembering these.
Well, you should say that you were telling me before we started this that you could remember all my awkward moments.
Oh, that's
because
true.
There's so many of them.
When you asked that question last week of Amanda, I was like, well, I remember all of Allison's awkward moments, but I don't remember one of mine. And I think I just forgot. But you reminded me one right before we started recording here that I was doing a Christmas sermon in Dormont. And there was some confusion on some street parking stuff happening, some barriers in places. And some of our folks went around barriers. We moved barriers. There was some confusion about that. And so in the middle of me preaching, the Dormont police chief came into the church and handed a note to someone who handed a note to me that said cars needed to be moved immediately or they were going to be towed. So we're halfway through a Christmas sermon, and they interrupt the service to hand this note. And so I just kind of read it out loud and was like, okay, Merry Christmas from Dormont, and just kept preaching, and nobody got up. Like, nobody got out of there. I think everybody who maybe parked on the street felt awkward. They're like, I don't want to be the one who stands up.
Did you tell them what the note said?
I did.
They had to move their cars?
I told the congregation, I was like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what the note says. Merry Christmas. Made a little like shrug joke of it, and then nobody got up. And I just continued to preach, and we went out, and all the cars were still there. So it was a really empty threat. But
what was your plan if your whole church just got like towed on Christmas Eve?
I don't know. My car wasn't on the street. I don't know. I don't know what that would be. But I just thought that was a really bold thing. I'm like, we're going to be done in 15 minutes. Can this not wait for 15 minutes? But he was like, no. Handed the note right in the middle of the service.
That is the difference between us. I would be like, everybody stand up. We got to go get the... You're so like calm in those situations, I feel like. Well, that's why you couldn't think of an awkward moment, because you don't feel awkward in that moment. You're just like, oh, well, we're not moving our car right now. We'll be there in 15 minutes. I would have been like, I guess we have to leave church right now. I don't know. Everybody go. Yeah, shut it down.
No, I was in the middle of a message. So I don't get awkward or embarrassed super easy. And so it felt like an empty kind of threat in the moment. So I was like, let's just keep going. Nobody stood up, and I think that it was because they would be embarrassed if they were like the one person to stand up. So we just kept going through it. But
well, at that point, you're all in it together, I guess. So,
sure.
Yeah. And then what would you say is something that comes to mind as one of your most beautiful or a really important moment of life in the church?
See, those I have a lot of. A lot of really beautiful moments. I think one that pops into mind almost immediately, though, is when Allison and I were first married. So we got married when we were in college, and we were first married. Money was very tight. She was in school. I was working. She wasn't working. And I remember somebody from our church put a card in our mailbox that had $50 in it, and they didn't sign it. It was just like wanted to bless us. I still have no idea who did it to this day, 25 plus years later. But it just felt like, for the first time, this was the first church I was involved in, like folks were just caring for us in like a really detailed, knowing finances were tight. Somebody did that. And I always remember that $50 in the mailbox, which today, wouldn't feel like a massive thing, but man, back then it just felt like such a blessing and like a warm thing to be cared for in that way, that it didn't come from like the church itself. It wasn't a program thing. It wasn't like the staff did. It was somebody in the church who
just
did
the church being the church,
yeah,
and just seeing you. It's like it's just an ICU kind of statement.
That was exactly it.
Yeah,
yeah, and so they may not sound amazing, but I've never forgotten that.
No, I think that's like the beauty of life in the church. I think it's a ton of little moments like that, and then it's important for us to hold on to those, even in the midst of the awkward moments as well. So.
Well, I think even like a handwritten kind of, we're praying for you, love you, that stuck with me to where every Sunday after we run services, usually it's part of my rhythm is to sit down and handwrite a few cards to folks.
Because that shaped you, getting that.
Yeah,
note.
I think so. I think I was one of the early ones. So like write it to thank volunteers, just to encourage somebody that I saw on Sunday. I'll try to do at least 2 or 3, just handwritten, not super complicated, and send them out. And I'll tell the other campus pastors that too. Like it's one of the most valuable things you can do. Yeah. Because it does show that you're just taking time to send something out. You're thinking of someone. It's a very small piece, but I think it has a lot of impact.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the places that started for me was somebody did that for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story. I think that's such a good way to even think about. Sometimes I think when we think about how do I be the church to other people, sometimes it feels like it needs to be something grandiose or really big and huge. But something that's just that simple as the $50 like anonymous gift is a really important part of
helped us buy groceries.
Yeah. But obviously more than that impacted who you are today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It for sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great story. Thanks for sharing. So, Amanda explained this a little bit last week, but just to kind of set us up, what we're going to be doing through this series is looking at metaphors of the church with Christ really at the center. So who is Christ? And then as a result of who he is, who are we as a body? And so you had 1 Peter 2, 4-5 this week about living stones. Yep. Would you want to I think it's been really nice how you guys have been reading that scripture at the beginning or having someone read the scripture at the beginning of the sermon. Why don't you read it here for us today to just kind of set up our conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, 1 Peter 2, it says, as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. You yourselves are like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Yeah, so with this one, there's a couple different ones in there. I mean, it talks about being a priesthood, but the living stones piece was interesting to me, especially when I thought through. So, like, I'm very much of a hands-on person. I like to build things. Yeah. I was thinking about how things are all individually shaped.
I mean, I noticed that Home Depot and Lowe's got like a call out and you're sponsored by.
I was trying, sponsored by. Yes, it came up on the screen. Yeah. Scan the QR code to get a discount. Yeah, but like when we go to buy things, you can just buy things wherever because they're standardized. But then this was interesting to think of how he shapes us differently, but not just for our individual sake, but how we fit together. Yeah. So I love that image of living stones being kind of built up together.
There's a lot in that tiny little passage. And the more I kind of meditated on it through your sermon, the more I was like, oh, there's so much I've just kind of read it and not spent a lot of time paying attention to it. But even living stones is quite an oxymoron in and of itself. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition of words and imagery. I think that it's being intentionally used there.
Yeah, it is an interesting passage, and it is one of those ones where, I mean, sometimes when you get scripture, it's so dense. There's so much stuff. You could spend, a couple different sermons just on that one passage right there.
Yeah, so that's I guess my question. Anything else that you wish you had time to explore or that you were curious about as you were studying?
I mean, I do think there are a lot of different angles you could go at from this one in particular, but that I know you like to ask that question of like, is there anything that we left out? And really the answer is no. I felt like I hit a lot of what I wanted to try to hit. But honestly, like kind of what's coming up in me with this series is it's a pretty long series and it's on the church. And I feel like I might run the risk with any other sermons of just kind of saying the same thing, but in a different way and which is not what I want to do. So this is challenging me even to think more deeply about my own kind of thoughts of the church or how I'm able to communicate it, because I don't want every single week in the sermon series to be the church is good for you and you should get in a small group and serve somewhere. If that's the punchline of every single week, then it's like, okay, by week 8 or 9, we're going to be like, we get it. Everybody gets it. So to think uniquely and differently about the church, all the different images we see in the scriptures, all the different ways that we're called to be clicked in and involved, I think there's a lot of richness there. But for me, I did feel like once I wrote the sermon for the weekend, the tank was pretty empty. I'm like, okay, I got to what I wanted to get to for the most part. So I didn't really have anything left on the table for this particular week. But I am kind of excited to like continue to dig in, to have a couple other sermons coming up in it, to try to think differently about the church, which I think is what the intention was when Amanda was creating this, was like for all of us to just think differently or think deeper about what the church is, why God gave it to us, what our involvement should be in, and how all that is supposed to wrap around who Jesus is and what he says the church is.
Yeah.
So,
I was telling Amanda last week, I don't know that I have had many times in Bible studies over the years where I've heard, here's my identity in Christ as an individual. I don't know that I have ever heard anybody walk through or even thought about doing what's my identity corporately as the body of Christ. And yet, as we're, I think, discovering in the series, there are so many analogies. Like Jesus was kind of like in Paul and Peter, and like it's like they need it again and again and again and again to be reminded of who the church is called to be and what it is like to live as a body of believers. So
yeah, that was one of my favorite pieces of her sermon, was the collective. This is who we are in Christ. Because that, I mean, it's all over the pages of the Bible, but we don't always think that way. We do think, well, what's my identity in Christ? Both matter, but that corporate piece we leave out a lot.
Well, let's talk about that, because you, I think, did a great job of touching on that. I wrote your quote down. You said, so each stone was carved to be unique, and really kind of highlighted that they're unique, but its value and function came from how it fit together with the stones around it. And then you also said, but just because God is shaping us individually does not mean it's for individuality's sake. So why do you think it's important that believers have a healthy understanding of both their individual relationship with Christ and also the importance of their corporate identity as one stone in the temple?
Well, I mean, I think that you see both in the New Testament, right? And we have to be careful to not separate what God has put together in there. Both of those matter. Our individual faith and response to faith really matters, because we have to have ownership over our own faith. It can't be your parents' faith, or maybe you've even heard the phrase before, like God has no spiritual grandchildren or something like that. It's like, it's not just an inherited thing. At some point you have to have ownership, because ownership matters. I always think about this when it comes to like the ownership piece of it, that I've told this in many different stories and contexts before about like my first car was just a piece of junk, but I loved it and I cared for it because I worked hard to buy it. I had ownership over it. Nobody would ever steal that car. Nobody would want it, but it was mine. And when you have ownership over something, you just think about it differently. You care for it differently. So you have to have ownership over your own faith. But at the same time, there is this piece that because I believe in Jesus, that means that I am now a part of Jesus's family. And that's undeniable in the Bible. Like you can't get away from that. And so for us to try to separate those two things, I think is what the temptation is in American individualism, where we're told that so much of our faith experience should be about, what do I get out of this? How is this growing me? How do I see this? And we lose that corporate identity when the Bible just marries those two together, that your individual response marries you into a family, which should have a corporate identity and a corporate response. And so it's a both and. It's never separated in the New Testament. And so for us to separate it becomes very dangerous. It can make our faith very narrow without us even knowing it.
Yeah.
When it's just about like us and what we get out of it over here, our own development, that I think that just stifles growth. You can only grow so much as an individual.
Yeah.
You need the corporate body to do all the things we talked about this weekend, to push you, to challenge you, to create some of that friction around you. That's what helps you learn things like patience and humility and all that. So it's both and.
Yeah. And probably I think it's just recognizing that and this isn't a knock against America, but our natural inclination is individualism. And so maybe if you're coming from a different culture, the corporate feel, the sort of like group dynamic might be a stronger understanding, and you might need to lean into what does it mean for my individual personal relationship with Christ. I think if you're an American, most likely our tendency is to go a different direction towards the individual. And so we maybe need to really focus on, okay, what is the corporate piece of this and how am I relating to a larger group? Just because our tendency would be so easily to go to kind of the self, I think.
Yeah. And maybe that group dynamic has kind of dissolved a bit. I know you and Amanda were talking last week about Robert Putnam's book, The Bowling Alone piece, of just how we no longer have these kind of group identities of things that we're connected to, like Rotary Club or the bowling league, or even these like community aspect things where we are becoming more and more withdrawn, more individual in a lot of different ways. So I think that we're losing that in a lot of different circles.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think so for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you walked us through Romans 12 and explained, these are my own words, not yours, but kind of that we maybe cherry pick the first part of Romans 2:12, which is talking about don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Yeah. But then right after that, it talks about, but do not think of yourself more highly than you ought. You are a part of a body. Each body has different members. And I do find that often Romans 12:2 is taught in isolation from the rest of that section. And I thought you did a good job of kind of like, hey, let's look at the context here. We need to look at the whole. There is a sense of like the transformation and renewing of your mind that happens is meant to be a part of this body. So I'm curious about just the modern church. Do you think there's a temptation towards information over transformation? And kind of along with that, maybe we even confuse the two. We think information is transformation.
Oh, yeah, I mean, for sure. That's kind of what I was hitting on when I was talking about that. Because I called that out because that's how I've seen it. Romans 12, 1 and 2 tend to be this nice little package about like
go to Bible study or something.
Yeah,
or like
giving
do your
life,
time.
renew your mind.
Yeah.
And then I never really kind of caught on to the context of like the afterwards is all about how we interact with people. And like even more than what I had space to read in the sermon, it just keeps going on about community and how you interact and how you use your gifts among people. So the transforming of your mind is meant to be for other people.
I believe I'm pulling just from my brain, but I think Romans 11 is also about other people in the book. So it's kind of sandwiched in there between two sections about.
But I always thought that passage was about me renewing my mind.
Because that's how we pull it out. Yes, exactly.
We do pull it out. We isolate it, but it is a lot of community context. But yeah, I think that we have a huge temptation to do that because of the way that information has changed. Like I was driving in the car the other day with my wife and my 17-year-old son, and somehow the topic of encyclopedias came up. And we're like, when we were kids and we had encyclopedias and how we had a few of them in our house. And I remember doing book reports and you had to like pick something based on the letters you actually owned because you couldn't do, if you didn't have the, I know I feel super old, right? But so we were just explaining to him of like, we didn't have we couldn't Google things to do book reports. You would go to the library or you'd pick. So back then information was about access, like how you could access it, how you had to research it. Now access is not the problem. We have too much access in my mind with the internet, too much access coming at us. Now information is about how do you filter it, not how do you access it. And so it's a huge difference. And I think that we're struggling just as a culture to figure out what is true, what is right, because so much stuff is being thrown at us.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the fact that so much information is being tossed at us, there is this temptation to feel like information, if we can filter through all the junk and get the right information, then I will have my mind transformed. I'll know what's right. I'll know what's true compared to other people who may not know what's right or know what's true. And so it is a huge temptation for us. But I think that what we see then, if you look in that context of Romans 12, is that the transformation is not just about the right information, but it's how do you allow the information to like seep into you and transform you. He talks about what is good, acceptable, and perfect. It's not just what it's true. Those are kind of words that like permeate into who you are. And I don't think you can do that with just reading the right article, listening to the right podcast, even going to the right church that has a good sermon or the right Bible study. I think that only happens in the context of processing and digesting that stuff with other people. I just don't think it can happen in isolation. I think isolation and transformation just don't go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's probably a prime example of that. Like we look at that verse and we're like, oh, I got to transform my mind. This is how I do it, information. But looking at the bigger context of things, the transformation not only happens in community, but it happens for community.
And sometimes because of it.
Yeah.
I think that's like some of the tricky part is that a lot of the transformation that the Lord, even moving it from my head to my heart, is when I have to put it into practice. So I can know I should love my neighbor, but that is very different than actually choosing to love somebody who I'm finding difficult in the moment, you know? And so that is when the real, I think, heart work begins. And so the transformation piece, I just think the information part feels way more comfortable. So we have probably a tendency to lean towards that. It's very natural to the way we learn. We've been taught in a sort of academic setting, maybe our entire like childhood into much of our adulthood, even some of us. And so we know how to receive information that feels comfortable. I can leave it in a cognitive space, my mind.
Yeah.
What doesn't feel comfortable is now when I have to actually forgive or actually interact with this person and it's tricky, or figure out how we can work through a difficult situation. There's a lot of like, that's where kind of the rubber meets the road, and that's where we do become transformed, but that's kind of the hard work. That's the exercising of it. It's a lot easier to sit on my couch and watch a video about exercising than go exercise, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah, that's the gap, I think, in the way we understand belief and the way they understood belief back then. So when you see these passages talking about believing in Jesus, we tend to immediately go intellectual, like renew my mind so that I believe the right things about Jesus. But back then it was a head and a heart thing. And I do think there's a piece of this where certain things can't move from your head into your heart without community, pushing you, coming up against you, challenging you in a lot of different ways. I just think that it can't really make that move. And it's kind of like, I mean, you alluded to it there, but just imagine if you went online to become a mechanic and you like watched all these videos, but you never actually got out any tools, never actually touched a car. It's like you have a lot of head knowledge, but you don't actually put it into practice. So like, are you a mechanic then just because you watch some videos? You're really not. And so the same is true with faith.
I mean, I'm basically a figure skater, an Olympian figure skater at this point, based on that logic.
Listen, we have accidentally got way too into curling in this Olympics.
Us too.
Yeah.
We are really into curling.
I don't understand any of it. I don't understand the scoring, but I am really into it right now.
Oh, my oldest son is super into it. And I think he was just into it because it's like, he just likes to be different, and it's like different.
But it's very analytical, which I can see he would like too, like the angles and the hits.
That's
and all
right.
that stuff.
Well, and so then my younger son was so annoyed, like, oh my gosh, why do we have to watch curling? He was complaining on and on because he wants to watch like the flips on snowboards, But then I come down yesterday morning, they had a 2-hour delay, and they are both like glued to the TV watching. They both have gotten into it. They've learned the rules. They've figured it out. They're deep. Zach and I were like, how do we get our kids? How does one become an Olympic curler? Can we start lessons for this?
You have to get into the curling community, Allison.
I know.
You can't just watch it on TV.
That's right.
You have to move from your couch.
Put it into practice. But I don't know how to put that in practice. So I don't know. But for another podcast, I guess. So, I mean, I think to the same conversation and like in the same idea of like comfort and the temptation towards information over transformation, you also talked about the importance of diversity in the church and being around people who are different from us. I imagine it's the same thing. It's more comfortable to be around people who think like you, have similar backgrounds as you. But why do you think the diversity in the church is such a critical part of God's design? And then I think also, what do you do if you're finding yourself like, oh, I've surrounded myself with a lot of people who are exactly like me, think like me, look like me, have similar backgrounds.
I think it's natural to gravitate towards people that are like you in a lot of ways. I don't think that there's necessarily anything drastically wrong with that, but I do think that it just limits how you can grow. If everybody looks like you, thinks like you, votes like you, has the same experiences as you, I think it limits how you grow. And I get to experience this a lot over the years, just even with the global church. So not even like trying to be diverse in my own context, but being willing to step outside of the country and go to places like Haiti and experience church in their context, or Cambodia, which have been many times, and experience church in their context, and to see how God is doing something really big and beautiful and so different than what he's doing here in my context. The theology is the same, the gospel's the same, but the expression of it is very different. I think I will give credit to the first church I was ever a part of. It's where I got baptized, where I got married. I referenced a few people from it this weekend in the sermon. But our church was predominantly a white church in town, but our pastor was very active in partnering with a black church in town, and they formed a really good friendship. And then they would do these, I think maybe it was like once a quarter, or maybe even more often than that, where we would go to their church and worship together, or they would come to our church and worship together. And if they were in our church, then it was their music program that was leading, or their pastor would preach. And it was always just kind of this opportunity to step outside of the context of what we were doing, step into something very different. And to watch their friendship and partnership was really beautiful. And I think maybe that's a little bit of where it kind of started for me, of like, oh, God does different things in different contexts. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just, oh, there's different things happening out there. So to experience that on kind of a micro level back then, and then get to see the global church, it just broadens your understanding. It makes your comfort zone a lot bigger and bigger and bigger. And it helps you to see that God, well, I think kind of what I was saying is like, God's image is in every single person, which means that the fullness of his image can never be expressed through one people group. Yeah. Right. I also think of, there's amazing passages like in Revelation where it talks about every tribe and tongue and nation around the throne of God, which lets you know that in heaven, on the other side of things, there's going to be tribes and tongues and nations. That stuff doesn't disappear. We don't all of a sudden become all exactly these carbon copies of people in heaven. There's still beautiful diversity in heaven that God, like here on earth, those things tend to be the things that try to divide us. Yeah. But in eternity, that's going to be like a piece of the beauty and the glory of God. So I think there's been a lot of experiences like that have kind of helped me step outside of that. I think it's really important to do that. I think that if you end up in a community, though, that is all the same, there's still ways to kind of step outside of that. So, for example, if you live in a community that's predominantly one race, one ethnic background, whatever it may be, because we are so kind of global, you can step out of that through missions, or even on a smaller level. Let's say you have a small group and all of your small group are all exactly kind of the same. Read resources from people who are not like you. I remember maybe a year or two ago, there's a pastor that I follow on Twitter, and he just reached out to all of his followers. He has a pretty large following. And he said, who are the Asian American pastors you're listening to right now? Because he wanted to know. And then he published that list of like, here's the podcast, here's the books that are being written, the articles that are being written. And I just saved that list. I'm like, well, I want to do that too. Yeah. Right. It was just a great way to kind of expand the way that he's thinking about the church. And so there are ways to do it. Yeah. Even if your context is very kind of limited wherever you live right now. Yeah.
I agree that I spent a summer in China when I was in college. And I remember thinking, maybe what was most eye-opening to me about that experience was I felt like even culturally, there were just different facets of God's character that were maybe highlighted in a different way than the culture that I was from. And I think both highlighted different aspects of his character, but it was like I was seeing another it's like to your point of how here it tries to divide us, but really it's meant to give us, when we're brought together in unity, a fuller picture of God and his character and his image, I think. And so I think experiences with other cultures are incredibly important because we get a bigger, fuller picture of the Lord.
And to have like Jesus as the thing that unites you all. So like I have people who I have spent a small margins of time with in Cambodia, who I'm maybe closer to them than my biological family. And that's the one thing that unites us, is that we both love Jesus. We recognize each other as brothers. And, we have both, I'm thinking of one person in particular, we have both traveled all the way around the world to see each other, support each other, care for one another. And that's just something I would have never expected when I said yes to Jesus, thinking that it was kind of an individual thing. Just the beauty of the church is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you look back over your life, what are some ways God has used the church to shape you? You touched this a little bit on this in the beginning, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we were talking about this before, that there was almost kind of like two versions of the sermon that went out this weekend. On Saturday, I felt like I was kind of tripping over myself a little bit. I didn't get some of the details, but the speech class thing, I failed. Yeah. I failed because I was nervous.
I know. Yes, you didn't say that in one of the sermons. Why you failed. Yeah.
I failed because I was too nervous to be in front of people. 11 people.
Yeah.
And now I stand in front of thousands, and it doesn't really bother me.
Did that just go away for you eventually? No, you're saying as people worked with you on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was both like me willing to take the step, but also people encouraged me along the way. That kind of got me there. But I think, clearly that's one as well. Like, I would have never thought that I would speak publicly, having failed public speaking class in college.
I also had a horrible public speaking experience. I won't dive into that, but I'm probably more, you've moved on. I haven't, I'm still wounded by mine. Yeah, class.
So, that was a big one. But I also think like the idea of confidence, leadership, like to think about being a leader in any context. I would have never imagined that back then. I'm more of kind of like the creative doer. I want to do things. I don't want to lead things. But now I love leading things as well. I love leading other people and helping with that kind of stuff. I think that's a big piece of it. I do think that global church piece has as honestly as I can say this, has developed some humility in the sense that, like, I don't know it all. I think that when we're younger, we tend to think like we know a lot more than we do, but with age, with more exposure, I tend to see like, oh my gosh, I really don't know everything. It really is more in his hands than I think that it is in my hands. I think that that's a piece of it as well. But there's just a lot of those things I could probably list on and on and on about how it's been developed in me through elders challenging me, small group members encouraging me, like all these different angles coming at me that have kind of developed that stuff over time. It's not like one big moment.
I'm curious, do you have a word or encouragement for the introverts among us? You and I have talked a little bit about this, that you are an introverted personality.
Yeah.
What was the book you referenced, When Introverts Go to Church?
It's called The Introverted Church.
Introverted Church.
I think Adam Hughes is the guy's name. He's a pastor. He's an introvert. He talks about how so much of the world is wired and designed for the extrovert to survive and thrive, but the introvert tends to get left out. So even in the way we talk about small groups, what we talk about from the platforms, those kind of things matter, because when we get super excited about all these things and want to invite people, the introverts are like, I just want to go home. Like, please just don't invite me into this. So there is an aspect of that. I think that for both of those sides, if you're extremely extroverted or extremely introverted, there are pieces that are challenging for the church. For the introvert, the community piece really is a hard step in the right direction. But I would just say, like, at some point, you have to take that step in that direction. You do have to kind of get out of your shell. You do have to step outside of your comfort zone, because it's God's design. So maybe that is a spiritual sacrifice for you that we talked about this weekend. Like Peter says, spiritual sacrifices. Stepping outside of your comfort zone is a spiritual sacrifice for a lot of introverted people. But also knowing yourself, knowing the balance of that, of like how much you can actually take. You don't want to be a false version of yourself, but you can't also just be kind of all internal all the time. Because this is God's design for all of us, he wouldn't want that for you. So I would say you just have to take a small step here and there. My first step at Northway was I volunteered to be on the production team. So I was just pushing buttons behind the scenes. That's how I first got involved at Northway. I was in the booth. I was hiding in the back, hiding where nobody could see me, right? That's the introverted way to do it. And so I was just in the back. But then I started to really like the people I was serving next to, got a little bit more into community, eventually got into a small group, and kind of kept going from there. But,
I am an extrovert, but when I first joined a small group in college, I was so nervous about it. And I felt like because I hadn't really been following Christ. And so I felt like any discussion around the Bible or Jesus, I didn't really have anything to offer to the conversation. And I didn't really know how to interact in a small group setting. It was something totally foreign to me. And so what I used to do is, I've probably told this story before, but I used to give myself a challenge. So I'd say, okay, this week, if you answer one question in Bible study, you get to buy yourself cheese sticks on the way home at the student union. And so I would like treat myself to a thing of cheese sticks on the way home if I was like brave enough to speak up in community and begin practicing.
That's interesting.
Speaking up in a small group.
For me, though, it would have never been about getting in the room with people. I'm content to get in the room and just listen. I don't have to say anything.
Oh, I felt like
I want to absorb it all and just listen. And that was fine for me.
I felt like I needed to challenge myself to like participate and not just listen.
Yeah.
So,
well, other people
because I
did
wasn't
that for me.
participating because of anxiety, not because it was like the reason for not participating was not a good reason, you know? And so I knew I needed to kind of like challenge myself. So,
well, for me, it was my crew leader. It was Britton. I mentioned him this weekend where he challenged me in the small group to speak up. Mm-hmm. And so I had a lot of people that would challenge me because maybe there was a little bit of that in me as well. Like, I'm too new at this. I don't know what I'm talking about. So why would I speak up? I just want to listen to everybody else. But Margene, Britton, a lot of these people that I listed off, they were like, no, you should speak up.
Yeah.
Because anytime we would have interactions, they're like, that's really good. You should share that with the group. So even those little small nudges in that direction is what eventually got me kind of over the speaking piece.
By the end of that first year, my freshman year, my Bible study leader was going to go out of town and ask me to lead the Bible study, which was hilarious at the time. And I couldn't eat all day. I was so nervous to lead this Bible. I was like, I can't lead a Bible study. What is she
But when it was
thinking?
done, did you like gorge on cheese sticks afterwards?
I don't know. I don't know. I was so anxious, so nervous. It's just so funny to look back on because now my job, for those who don't know, is to lead a lot of small group leaders.
You train people how to do that.
So, and I've been leading small groups really ever since that day.
Yeah.
So, but it's to the point of like the practice, like having to get out of our comfort zone sometimes to allow the Lord to develop the things in us that He's wanting to develop. So,
yeah.
Okay, last question, and we'll wrap it up. What is, and maybe speaking to the introverts out there, or speaking to someone who's maybe even just had church hurt, but what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's struggling to find their place in a church, whether it's ours or another church?
I think that if I've said this to a lot of folks before. I think that if you're failing, or if you're struggling to feel like you fit in somewhere in the church, you're not failing. Like that feeling happens to a lot of people, whether you've been wounded in the past or you're a new believer and you feel like your experience there where like everybody else has it figured out and I don't. I think that that's a normal experience that we kind of have to push through. So I would say for folks, don't feel like one would be like, don't feel you have to have it all figured out before you step into some sort of community is a big piece. Just step in and kind of see how God leads.
Give yourself some cheese sticks after.
Reward yourself with cheese sticks.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you're going to find the like perfect small group or the perfect serving opportunity. Even just like try something, right? Just try something on. Try it out. If it doesn't work, maybe switch to a different serving opportunity. But you have to take the first step. Like that kind of stuff doesn't always come to you. You have to step out. I think that's a big piece of it. And then I would probably start small with some of it. Not feel like you have to swing for the fences on some of this stuff. I had a guy years ago who came up to me and he said, I think I'm going to go to seminary because I want to be a pastor. Like he's been around Northway for a while. He's like, I'd really love to do this. But this was the same guy that I could never get to volunteer anywhere. He would never serve in the parking team or in the production booth or in kids' church. Like, so that idea of like, you have to start small and kind of gradually work towards certain things is just a reality of life. It's how God kind of grows. He rarely throws us in the deep end and like, here, all of a sudden you have this massive thing that happens in your life. So I think starting small, recognizing that you won't always find perfection on the first couple tries is incredibly important. And then just, being willing to step outside of your comfort zone, just try it. I mean, I've been in a lot of awkward small groups over the years. I've been in a lot of amazing small groups, good serving teams.
And sometimes they're one and the same, like sometimes both.
Yeah,
you know?
Depends on the season and what everybody's going through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm the awkward part.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So that's what I would say. You got to start somewhere. You have to start. You just have to step into it and see what it's like. And then trust God is going to do something in that. Like if he is, that's one of the beautiful things about the church that you see in the New Testament, that I think a lot of people will miss is this idea, like they go to a church, maybe they were wounded, maybe they didn't like something, and then they're like, we love Jesus, but the church is such a mess. Yeah, like the New Testament shows us that it's kind of messy, but he's doing something intentionally with that messiness. That's why it talks about us being stones that are being shaped. That's why in Philippians 1, it talks about like he who began a good work in you is still bringing it to completion. In Ephesians, I think it talks about like one day he's going to present her as a spotless bride, but we're all in progress. And that progress has something beautiful that God's doing in it that we don't fully understand. But for us to like stand on the sidelines and not step into that progress that's happening, we miss out on so much stuff. So at some point you just have to do it. You just have to take a step into it, embrace the messiness, the awkwardness, the weirdness, and look for the beautiful parts in there. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks for having me.
Always great to talk to you.
Yeah.